Hi, welcome to our special council meeting tonight. Tonight, we're going to, the first thing on the agenda is we're going to be swearing in our newly elected officials. And I think we have one here tonight and one is out of town. And our school board members were not clear if they were notified to come tonight. So we'll find out from them.
Dan,
Hello.
please raise your right hand. Do you, Daniel Demerit, swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and of this state so long as you shall continue to be a citizen thereof?
I do.
Do you also swear that you will faithfully discharge to the best of your abilities the duties incumbent upon you as a town councilor according to the Constitution, the laws of this state, and the provisions of the Orono Town Charter and ordinances?
I do.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
I will collect the signature. And I will sign as well, and you may take your seat at the front.
Thank you.
And that would conclude the swearing in, as I do not see any of the school board members present.
Okay. Whoop. Nope.
Okay.
Almost. Thank you, Shelley, and thank you, Dan. Second item on the agenda is the roll call to open our special town council meeting, and all of our counselors who have been sworn in are here tonight. And I also want to say that I am not chair, I am pro tem. I'm here until we have our election, our chair election in April. So I just want to make that clear to the public. The third item on our agenda is acknowledgements by council members. I'm going to start with Councilor Laraway.
Sure. So first of all, I'd like to acknowledge everybody who took part in making this last election happen. It's a lot of work by our town staff, so I really appreciate what they do. And also, I heard that the Orono High School Jazz Band got silver at the State Instrumental Jazz Festival. And one of our students, I apologize, I don't remember their name, apparently won the Outstanding Soloist Award, which I think is great.
Sure. We have had two meetings of our community conversation series. They're becoming increasingly well attended. So we'll have our third upcoming shortly. And I really want to acknowledge and show my appreciation for the people who've come out and talked about infrastructure issues, people who've talked about service issues, and in particular, we had a really robust discussion about Parks and Rec last week. So that was great to see everybody from the community attend.
Councilor Berthasell.
Sure thing. I would like to acknowledge the sunshine, which I've been very much enjoying. And also with excitement, share that the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee is getting a meeting together probably for April, or if not, then soon thereafter, and acknowledge our town manager's work in helping to coordinate getting that group together and all the folks who've stepped up to serve.
Councilor Kenny.
Yes, I would like to acknowledge specifically, it's kind of a follow-up of Jeff's acknowledgement, but specifically Megan Dean and Dan Demerit for putting out a survey to community members with regards to our rec program that received, I think, 99 responses, which is a pretty solid response. So I wanted to acknowledge the two of them for their efforts there.
Merritt, your first acknowledgement.
Well, thank you for the first opportunity to acknowledge something. I wanted to thank Shelley Crosby, Bell Ryder, and everyone who participated in the elections, particularly the counting. Very impressed with how Shelley runs the counting with a lot of transparency. We had at one point, particularly in this election, we had so many write-in votes for Sarah Marks, and it was astounding the process that they went through. And one, just to illustrate it, there was one vote cast for Sarah Marks Wood, and the work that went into making sure that voter's intent was properly cast for Sarah Marks. I really appreciated how the work they did to make that happen. I think it was very transparent and matched the voters' intent. So thank you to them and everybody who participated to make our election successful.
Thank you, Dan. And I would like to acknowledge that today is the first day of spring. Yay! Just like the sunshine. It's also the only palindrome of the year. And it is the perfect day for new beginnings. So I want to say welcome to new counselors. A new council is going to begin, and this is the first day. And I think we should head out on a positive note and get some work done. So thank you so much. And I'll keep going. The next item on the agenda is public comments. So anyone who wishes to speak are welcome to come to the microphone. Or if you're on Zoom, state your name, briefly address the council, your name and your affiliation. Council comments should not be repetitive, and chair reserves the right to limit speaker time. So go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I think this is the first public comment I've ever made. Should be. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Right. Hello, my name is Kyle Drexler. I am the town planner and have been an employee with the town for over 4.5 years now, working in the town office. On behalf of myself and some other community development employees here, or who I've had a chance to speak with about this, we just wanted to respond to some of the public comments that have been made recently at some recent council meetings around the work environment at the town office. Previously, some comment was made by members of the public at a council meeting, insinuating that working conditions and environment at the town office might be poor or even threatening for employees working here. And that due to this kind of negative working environment, it was claimed that this might be the reason that there is now an effort present to unionize. From our perspective, this has simply not been the case. And while I will not speak about specific employee views or motivations around unions, I will say that supporting a union does not only have to come from a set of problematic circumstances. One could simply believe that unions are a good thing to have, regardless of current conditions. Employees change over time, and therefore work environments and cultures may change as well. What is okay at any one given moment may not always be so. Unions could theoretically offer some stabilization and support in this area. But that in no way means that there is a poor work environment right now acting as the underlying cause for that effort. We disagree strongly with the notion that the environment and conditions at the town office are poor or make us feel threatened as employees. Since my time working for the town, I have experienced an incredibly communicative and flexible relationship with everyone at the town office, including those in a supervisory or managerial role, whether it's working with Mitch, who directly oversees the community development office, or Sophie as town manager. They have always made it clear that our well-being is of utmost importance. Their doors have always been open when needed, and I've never once felt like my thoughts or concerns went unnoticed or unresponded to. The culture of collaboration and team within the town office is one of the things I enjoy the most about working in Orono. And to see people speak on behalf of all town office staff to say the opposite is greatly concerning. I do not represent every single town office employee, and therefore I cannot speak on behalf of every single town employee and all of their personal interactions. However, as town employees working at the town office, we would like the same consideration granted towards us. I highly encourage any member of the community who is interested in the day-to-day life of town office employees to take the time to simply speak to them about what it's like working for the town. As members of the public continue to discuss this matter going forward, please take this into consideration before these types of generalizations are made about what it is like working at the town office. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle.
Hello, everyone. Patrick Estee, Code Enforcement. So the work environment, in my opinion, is not a toxic environment. I just want to reassure you and the public that that's not the environment that I work in. It's a very family-oriented environment. I have a 14-year-old. I go to all his sporting events. And there's not one fight that, I have to stay here and work. It's family comes first. And I just want to share that with you guys that I like my environment. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that testimony. Is there any more public comment? Belle, is there anybody on Zoom?
Nobody has their hand raised.
Nobody? Okay. We'll move on. The next item is town council internal planning discussion.
So I don't want to get out in front of town council, but we are getting ready to end March and April is on the way, and we normally create a general plan every quarter. So I'm looking for some guidance as to how we're gonna kind of move forward. I had provided a draft, I guess, depending on how you look at it, second quarter if you're looking at the calendar, fourth quarter if you're looking at the fiscal year plan. And I'm just trying to work through that and bring people kind of along with planning and trying to get some kind of feedback from council. And I provided those as background to you and also to the public.
And Sophie, are you looking at the calendar? Are we looking just at the calendar that we're looking at for planning, or what do you need us?
So I'm looking at the calendar. I've had some conversations with Jeff about community development and planning efforts moving forward. We've got a couple of promised events that I think we need to kind of get calendared. But I am mostly looking at this point, we're actually scheduling work out into June for staff. And so I kind of need to know when we're going to have the availability to meet with council. But I also am aware that we have a counselor that's not here looking for some guidance.
Do any council members want to chime in? I just have to say that I've looked at the schedule and I don't have any conflicts with what you've got here, if that's what you're looking for. Do you have anything, Jeff, that you wanted?
No, for me, the schedule looks really good. I do have a conflict next Monday evening, which will preclude me from attending the committee meeting. I'm not sure that our committee agenda is really tight next Monday. So there may be an opportunity to grab a night and reposition some of that. I'll ask.
I think we could do that. And I was also looking at whether or not we want to do some of the training piece on the 10th in workshop at the end of our council meeting, if we can keep that agenda fairly small.
So we're not talking about whether we're going to continue with Monday meetings, or are we? Because I personally, for me, I think I like this works well. Just keeping this Monday schedule. And
so usually, once we get people kind of seated, the next step would be, in fact, I think I sent out, I sent out the survey of what times of the day, what days of the week work for council, and also just some logistics pieces. If people could get those in and done, I would be able to come to you on the 3rd with kind of the lay of the land per se on the schedule. I will also say it's my experience lately that it is hard to get a group of people together. So if Mondays work for people, that would kind of be my inclination. But normally after the election, council kind of regroups and just evaluates that to make sure that somebody didn't get elected who, for example, has to work on Mondays or something like that.
aside from that, I think everything looks great. maybe I could, I'll miss April 3rd. I'll be away, but
Yeah, this
Just
looks
FYI.
great to me too. I think you took sort of previous members of the council's schedules into consideration already. So really appreciate that.
Yeah, works for me.
So
You
the
need
other
anything else, Sophie? Yeah.
Yep,
Oh, go
just
ahead,
the
Jen.
other thing I would highlight on this is that from March 21st to April 20th or 22nd is Ramadan. And we have previously agreed that we would end meetings by sunset and try not to hold public facing meetings. You will notice that we do have a Board of Assessment review hearing. And that took a lot of juggling to get lawyers and consultants on board for that meeting date. So that's one that I would suggest we're not worried about the sunset.
Does anyone else? Do you have anything, Dan? Are you all set with the calendar?
The schedule looks good to me. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else that you need, Sophie? All right.
Cheryl, is your microphone off?
Yes, it is. The next thing is town manager's update.
So I distributed last night a draft update and then had somebody other than me proofread it. So have a final version. These updates are also available on my the town manager's departmental webpage. There were just a couple of things that I wanted to bring to people's attention. I know Councillor Kenny, you had a handful of questions I'm working my way through. I'll get you answers to. The major one is I'd like to talk for just a few minutes about change that we're making in the police department. And I think that it is more important than just a written discussion. So I don't know, Chief, do you want me to start? And so last week we met with the department and had a conversation because we have police officers who are working considerable overtime, more overtime than they are comfortable working. We are down to 7 full-time sworn officers available, patrol officers, and it's definitely taking a toll. In an effort to improve morale, but also kind of balance that work-life equation a little bit. As I had reported in previous reports, we brought back Officer Courtney Boucher, who left us when she had her baby, decided to leave the workforce, and now is thinking she will put her toe back in the water. We would love it if she would put that toe back here because she's a phenomenal police officer. But we also know that one person isn't going to make necessarily all of the difference, especially someone who's balancing their own work-life issues. So the request that came forward was to allow officers that have not been to the full-time basic law enforcement training program offered by the Criminal Justice Academy, which would make them blue pins or full-timers, I guess is kind of the way we talk about them. Orono is a unique agency in the state in that we don't use reserve officers or green pins, which would be someone who is certified to work 1,040 hours a year. And many other departments use these partially trained folks. We have been resistant to that. Under the national accreditation program, it was simply not allowed. The main accreditation program, which we now fall under, does allow for that. We still have some concern. I mean, so we are not simply saying appoint a reserve and put them in a car and have them patrol the streets. Instead, we are talking about putting them through a field training process, which I will let Chief and Dan get into. But also looking at the places where our field training might not be as good as what somebody would get at the academy by design, because they go to the academy and get field trained. The good news is that we have instructors, certified instructors on staff in those areas. So the idea would be to take the field training and augment it with these other higher risk areas. So with that, I'm going to turn it over for details. Does that work for you, Chief?
Sure, yeah.
Can I just quick question? Does, in May, when school humane lets out, does that help at all with, I know we don't get into too many details about scheduling and whatnot, but does that lighten the load for us at all when that occurs?
One of the things that we see are many more year-round inhabitants of Orono, so students who are staying longer. There is still significant activity at the housing complexes. It is a little slower here, but when you've only got 7 people and you wouldn't want, the goal is to never have less than 2 working that really, and they work 4 days a week, 10-hour shifts. It kind of limits it just for basic skeleton staffing, you're having to put overtime in. But so the answer is a little bit, but not a lot.
All set. Jeff Lowe, Director of Public Safety. So I'm going to be speaking on behalf of the police department tonight and just explaining a little bit what we're talking about when we talk about looking at reserve officers and what that means. The 2 colors that you need to remember that I will probably reference during this talk are green and blue, and that relates to the colors of the pins that they wear on their uniforms. Green pins are reserve officers, and blue pins are the officers that go to the full-time police academy located in Vassalboro, and that's the pin that they come out of. Start off what traditional training hours are for reserve officers. It's 200 hours is what a reserve officer is expected to have before they go on the road and do the work. So that is 40 hours of classroom time, online time where they receive education. It is 120 hours of in-class practicum where they do some hands-on stuff and receive direct instructor classroom time. And then there is another, there's another 40 hours after that of 40, right, Dan, of field time? 40, 80, 40. Yeah. So the 40. So after they come out of that 80 of hands-on time, they have to work with a trainer for 40 hours in the field before they can reserve that, or before they can receive that reserve officer status. Now, a long time ago here in Orono, we decided that was not what we wanted to do. Having gone through that program back in 1990, to go ahead and age myself here, I can tell you that that was not something that I would recommend anybody do, especially in today's age and risk of liability and exposure and those types of things. The Maine Criminal Justice Academy full-time program is a residential program, like I said, held in Vassalboro. It's 720 hours long. And that covers everything that you receive in the reserve officer program, in addition to a host of other programs such as pursuit driving, additional marksmanship training, a few other things like that, in addition to the psychological stress that they place on the recruits. It's very much structured like a boot camp format where you go in, you get woken up all hours of the night, you get to do push-ups and, you know, all that fun kind of stuff. And then when you're done, you get to come out with your blue pen and you're considered a certified police officer. The big differences between a green pin and a blue pin is the green pin is not allowed to do pursuits like we talked about. They're not allowed to engage in pursuing suspects or anything like that. They are not allowed to investigate accidents that have a serious injury or are fatal accidents. Those are 2 of the biggest things that they're not allowed to do. Theoretically, anything else they can do, at least initially, until a supervisor or somebody more trained comes along and takes over for them. That might be other forms of investigation or whatever the incident may entail. Realizing that was not enough time here in Orono and the risk that that poses to certain agencies, especially an agency like Orono, where we have such a diverse population, we have such a transient population. We have a population, or we have, I shouldn't say a population, we have a belief in community-focused policing where we don't want we don't want overly aggressive police officers on the street doing things that don't reflect well on the town or the department. That just wasn't going to work for us. So through this process, where we realized we were short-staffed, and this is a national problem. I don't want you to think this is an Orono issue. This is a statewide, it's a national problem. The law enforcement just doesn't draw the response from applicants like it has in the past. And there's probably a host of reasons for that. I'm not going to get into them. It suffices to say that we're not alone in this boat. We're looking for ways to augment our staff and give some relief to the crew that is working downstairs. I saw Councilor Kenny doing the math on his fingers there, and 100% right, that doesn't add up. And if anything, running short staff like that creates more of a risk for both the officers and the town, because the officers are task saturated. They are, I hate to use the term overworked, but I'm not sure how else to put it. When you get that type of work fatigue in any job that you do, you become less attentive, you become less focused, you're more likely to make errors, commit errors, you're more likely to be irritable, those types of things. And that's not what we want in police officers that are working. So we sat with the patrol officers that are dedicated. All of our officers are dedicated. There are 7 that have been here the longest. We sat with them and said, what can we do to fix this? And as Madam Manager brought up, one of the things that they came back with was the green pin program. Our initial response to that was can't happen because of that limited training. And what we worked out collectively through both the management and the law enforcement officers is that those green pins would need to go through our internal field officer training program. Now, our internal program is 480 hours of time. That's about 12 weeks at 40 hours a week, which in relationship to other programs who are going to bring on reserve officers or green pins, if you will, is far and away more than what you would find, like I said, in other places. So that's the first part. And as they go through that, not only are they getting all the information that they would get through the academy, they're getting the Orono take on it, meaning they're getting laid out for them exactly what we expect, exactly how we want them to respond, how we want them to handle whatever the incident may be, whether it's a loud music complaint, whether it's a neighbor dispute, whether it's a case of harassment or whatever the case may be. We tend to handle things a little bit differently here in Orono. We have to pay attention to the core laws. There's no doubt about that. But we are more at times person focused, I think, than some other agencies are. And that's not something you come out of the police academy with. That's something that has to be built in your organization. So that's one of the things that would definitely be laid out in that 480 hours. So they would go through all of that training. Now, there are 2 additional programs that add an additional 80 hours to that training, which is mechanics of arrest and control. So basically that is a week-long program what they go through where they learn how to de-escalate and they learn how to talk to people. And they learn if they have to go hands-on with somebody. They get this in the green pin program, but they get more of it in this program where they learn minimum amounts of restraint and control and those types of things, so that they are better equipped to deal with those situations and use absolutely the minimum of force necessary to either effect the arrest, to separate parties, to, I hate to use the term neutralize a threat, but that is what it is. So again, that is added training that they wouldn't normally get through that green pin program. The second program would be intoxication recognition. And that really is looking at people who might be under the influence of an intoxicating substance, be it liquor or other substance that might be impairing them from operation or of a motor vehicle or whatever the case may be. That alone is worth a lot because it can help us prevent unnecessary arrests. It can help identify mental health issues versus intoxication issues, those types of things. So that, again, is something that we wouldn't necessarily get in the Green Pin program, but it's something that we would deliver here in-house. So when you take the pre-service program or the Green Pin program minus the last 40 hours, and you add it to the 560 hours of field training that we will put all candidates through here, not just Green Pins, but even certified police officers that come to work for us go through that 480. If you add that all together, I'm coming out at about 680 hours of field training for those reserve officers before we put them on the road. And bear in mind, the police academy is 720 hours. And what you're missing again is that accident investigation, that reconstruction piece. You're missing some practical scenarios that they run at the police academy. And I would argue, and I think Dan would argue, that those would be made up by actual real life street interaction in the way that we want them to interact with people here in the community. And then the week-long driving component, the pursuit driving component, which they are prohibited by law, not just Orono regulation, but those Green Pins are prohibited by law from getting into police pursuits. The reason we can't just run our own police academy here is because the academy has to be accredited. And the only agency in the state of Maine that's able to do that right now is the Maine Criminal Justice Academy. And rightfully, I would want to keep that with them or another large agency like that, because accreditation carries a lot of liability and responsibility with it that I don't think we would want to take on here in the town of Orono. So I think that pretty much summarizes what we're looking at doing, and I certainly take questions or whatever.
The only two things I would add is, one of the things we're looking at here is making sure we don't end up with a failure to train scenario, which would increase our liability. This would be a longer term. Yes, there's a short term kind of crisis that's driving this. Within the contract, our collective bargaining agreement, we can put these per diems on. So people who are filling vacant shifts, who are filling overtime shifts that other unit members do not want, we can do that. What we can't do is create a part-time force and just fill the schedule without going back to the bargaining table. So I think it's important for us to first understand who these part-timers are going to be, and to see if it's going to work. The thing that I absolutely would commend Deputy Chief Merrill on is his connection with his people to bring them to the table. He does a great job managing what is less than ideal conditions. And I think the way he immediately brought this to our attention so that we could create an avenue for our people to be heard is really important, and that they care enough to be heard is really important.
Sophie, one other thing that I'd like to add for the council is our intention is to never have one of these Green Pins on the road alone. There will always be a Maine Criminal Justice Academy certified police officer with them, not in the car with them, but available on duty to give them support and guidance and mentoring, and to make sure that our expectations here in the town are upheld, because the blue pins that work for us now really are the plank holders of the organization, and they want to make sure that things are being done correctly on the street. So if this Green Pin person isn't cutting the mustard, if you will, or they're not meeting what we expect, then we expect them to step in and make corrections and take action from there, even if it's reporting to us, so we can take corrective action, even if it's separating the person. So that would be the only other thing, I think.
Yeah, so the per diem is different than the Green Pins. Am I understanding that?
No, so a Green Pin is around certification and what they have been trained in. A per diem is different than a part-timer, is different than a full-timer. So per diem is based on the employment relationship. Per diem meaning think on call,
Per
think
day.
per day.
Yeah.
So when there is a vacant overtime shift in the schedule, we have to first offer it to our union patrol officers, full timers, and that are qualified to work it, because we have one right now that's here that's not qualified to work it. And then that can get pushed out to whatever part-timers. So Officer Boucher, who just came back right now, is qualified to be able to take those hours, those overtime shifts.
So sorry, I'm a little slow on the uptake here, but if we were able to hire 2 people tomorrow and put them through this 17-week training, would they potentially be full-time officers, or are they just going to be part-time staff or per diem?
So
Workers.
they're per diem. If they then choose to apply for vacant positions because they see how wonderful it is to work in Orono, I'm not thinking that would be a bad thing.
So when we spend the 17 weeks on them, that's just for them to come in and work per diem when we need them? And is the expectation that would be, but getting that done would be the 17 weeks full-time for 17 weeks and get it done? Or is this like a long-term, like somebody would get all of that training in over the course of a year or something, where just.
So that's going to depend on the person's motivation that wants to come to work here. There are existing green pins out in the community that have expressed interest. And so that will, that takes 120 hours off their training time, because they already have that initial green pin piece. So the remaining hours are field training time here in Orono to learn that process.
So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard over the past year or something that one of the issues is that is you have to go to the police academy, you have to live there. That commitment is hard for people. So this obviously gets around that, but I'm not hearing that we could do this and hire a full-time person. If we hired a full-time person, then what? If we hired one of these people full-time, would they still have to go to the academy?
So we wouldn't hire this person full-time? Well, yes, I take that. I'm sorry. If this person said, hey, I want to work for the town of Orono full-time, then we would bring them in, they would fill a full-time spot, and we would send them to the police academy. By law, somebody who is a green pin cannot work full-time hours. They're limited in how many hours they can work a year.
Because it's impressive. Thank you for the explanation. It sounds like a great alternative and creative thinking. That all sounds awesome. It's too bad that couldn't be more, I guess, to overcome that hurdle of having to send someone away for however long they have to go to the academy. But I guess you're saying that that's just not
So
legal.
there are several bills in the legislature right now, some of which might
Help with that.
help with that. And yes,
Okay, not for me.
So just so the council's clear, we don't see this as an ideal situation. We're really at an 11th hour. We have to do something here. And this is the best that we've been able to come up with to throw out and say, hey, we've got holes. This is how we think we need to fill these holes. And it's what we're presenting. We would rather hire, nothing against green pin officers, but we would rather hire blue pin police officers, but they just are not available. And they're not coming to us for transfers or anything like that.
the other thing I would just say is that while this is short-term and it will take a while to get people up to speed, we right now have one person at the academy. We've got another person scheduled and 2 vacancies that would be for patrol that likely won't have gone to the academy yet. So this is not a short-term crisis for us, I believe. I think we need to kind of be prepared for this to last a while.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. It strikes me that, so the green pin try to follow all the different positions and things, and it's the timeline. So do we have, it feels like to me, these officers who'll be working for us are green pinned, and they'll get this training in Orono, maybe Orono enhanced. I like to name things. So, because I think names help people understand. But if someone's, do we have any green pins working for us now?
So we do have one green pin officer that's in field training right now. What would typically happen in that scenario is that officer would have to ride with a second police officer
I ride in a physical car or
Yep.
just on the street at the same?
in
okay.
a physical car with
Yeah.
that, with another police officer until they went to the police academy before they could operate alone. Under this program, we're capitalizing on that Orono town employee and actually putting them on the road in a vehicle of their own and being able to perform law enforcement duties within their scope until they go to the criminal justice academy. Again, with that other blue pin officer, but that officer being in a separate vehicle, so they could answer 2 calls or whatever the case may be.
And who's in charge of the training? I mean, teaching is a profession all of itself. So who's in charge of the training? Does it pull people off the road while we're training people or?
So it doesn't pull people off the road. What is required for didactic learning, if you will, or classroom learning is pretty much done online. And then the officers, we have a field training officer program in-house. Officers go out to field training, officer training, if you will. They are certified to perform that role. And then they come back and they deliver that in-house for those people. Right now, we have Sergeant Haas, and is there another one? So we have that capacity in-house to be able to deliver that training.
It sounds to me, thank you for all the work that goes into it and dealing with the shortage that we're having in this workforce, like so many of our other workforces. It would strike me that it might be helpful, Sophie, to have like a briefing type document that explains it for the public so that, because I'm still trying to get my head around it. And I'd like to see it in, maybe with some graphics or something like that, what the context is, why it is that we're having to do this, the steps we're trying to take that are beyond, put into context what we're doing as a community to make sure that our law enforcement and public safety in Orono adheres to kind of our flavor of it. And I think that'd be really helpful to the extent that something like that could be produced and shared with people, because we'll get questions about it. And it's important to be out in front in terms of how we're addressing the challenge. But
Sophie, your microphone.
As of right now, the only per diem that we would have working would be Officer Boucher, who went through our field training program here and is a blue pin. So she has all of the certifications. But yes, the answer to your question or thought is absolutely.
Jeff.
First, I want to thank the whole senior team for the creative way they've looked at this. I understand, the lag that going to the full-time academy creates, and also the lack of people just applying for these jobs today. So one thing you didn't mention that I think Deputy Chief Merrill and his command staff should be applauded for is their willingness to ride shifts on the street themselves. And you didn't mention that, but that's, I think, a noble step for the officers and also for our community. The other thing that I think is really important, and you've emphasized it quite a bit, but if we do produce a document, it might be nice to share our vision of community policing. Once again, we do have that written out, and we could just make sure the public aware that, the training that we're doing here is integrated holistically with that vision of community policing. So we're not just putting out radar operators on the street. We're really putting out community police officers. Thanks.
I only had one question, and it's just more curiosity. Does Academy run like a rolling admission, or do you have to wait until like September? Like, do you have like a program that, no, you don't have to wait?
As the person who has to manage this,
So officially, Dan Merrill, I'm the Deputy Police Chief. So let's make this concise. The academy is only run twice a year. They run a winter academy and a fall academy. So they run one that goes from January to May, and then they take a little break in the summer, and then they run one from August to December. That's what they've done for the last, all the times that I can remember, outside of one time right before Corona started, they got this pilot off the ground where they were going to do 3 a year. And it was literally that first year when they were going to do 3, Corona hit and it just busted the whole program. It just sent it completely sideways, and the rest is history is what happened with that. So now we're back to the old schedule.
So my follow-up too is that, so when we have officers that are ready to go, we actually have to wait for academy to start.
Yeah. So
So there's, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so like,
That was my question. Thank
one
you.
of the perfect examples that we're trying to capitalize on right now is we have an officer that we hired the last week in December. His hire date was December 29th. He won't start an academy class until the second week in August. So for all that time, he is not, in the current structure, he is not filling a void that we have in our schedule. And we think that we can provide a training program where during these next 8 months, we can get him the training that he needs to be able to be usable to help fill the void that we have. So it goes off a hiring date system is how the academy is filled. So he was hired December 28th. The January academy started January 17th, but in that less than a month time span, the class is already full. They run at 120 to 130 John Doe filled spots by agencies pretty much year round. And then, people come and go, but,
And I was curious because I have seen bills in our legislature right now that are trying to alleviate that problem with public safety officers and training and trying to get some courses at maybe Eastern Maine Community College or someplace that's close that you don't have to send your officers away, and something that's a little bit more consistent. So hopefully maybe you need to testify like legislature.
yes.
Yeah. Thanks.
So on this, by the same token, we want to keep our heads down a little bit with the Criminal Justice Academy, because being able to get people in on a regular basis is really important to us. Dan has historically, the OPD has historically taken slots in most every academy just because we turn people over. As people tell us, our residents don't get any older, and they do.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any more questions?
Yep.
Okay.
So I was curious, in this training program that we run, how soon into it are people put on the streets?
So once they come to us, once they've cleared green pin training and they've cleared the in-house classroom stuff that they need to clear.
So they have to be green pin before even starting this? Is that
Or
the idea?
before they go on the road, they have to be green pin certified. So even somebody if Sophie applied today and said, hey, I want to be a police officer, before she would be able to get into a cruiser and do any work, she would need to go through the green pin training. Now we would give her, there's plenty of classroom training that we would need to give her, but we would send her to that training. And then we would put her on the road when she's completed that with a field training officer. So she would always be with a blue pin police officer during that field training time. So in this scenario, a green pin would not go on the road by themselves until they had completed that 680 hours of training.
Even when they are on the road, they're not by themselves because there's a blue pin in another car.
That's right.
But still, I mean, they could be on opposite sides of town together. I mean, I confess that I appreciate the creative thinking that's going into this, and I understand this staff is stretched. But I'd be lying if I didn't still say I was concerned about people who were undertrained, patrolling the roads. And I understand that I might be in the minority here on that one. And I'm not saying, when I say undertrained, I simply mean not fully trained. And because we've had this value of trying not to fill positions like this, I'm sure we all sort of share, at least partially, the value that I'm expressing here. I see that it's a last ditch effort to try to fill these spots where our people are overworked. So I can appreciate the problem. But I guess I still retain that concern that I think motivated the initial hesitation to bring these in.
I can't say that we don't share that with you.
That was the only major thing I flagged.
Is that all we have left on our agenda? Was the town manager's update? Do we need a motion? Are we at adjournment already? Great. Do I need a motion to adjourn?
I actually did have a question about the opioid settlement agreements.
There
If
we go.
you could, if you could just tell us briefly sort of where that's at. It's a small an agenda item here, but I think it's important and I'm interested to see where that work is at.
So the work is at, I have finalized.
What, could you repeat the question, Rob? We didn't hear it clearly.
Just asking if we could get sort of a more detailed overview of one of the items in the town manager's report was referring to the opioid settlement agreements.
Okay, opioid settlement. Thank you.
So as we discussed at our previous council meeting, there was an opportunity for, so the town had already taken action to join the settlement for Johnson & Johnson and the other one. They, in the meantime, we were given an opportunity to also join two settlements that involve Teva, Allegren, Allergen, Walmart, and Walgreens. They're two separate settlements. This is all run through the Attorney General's office for the state. We went ahead, brought that to council. You agreed, authorized me to sign. And so we are, along with the city of Bangor and Penobscot County, the entities that can collect those settlement funds individually. The rest are delivered through the state opioid settlement program. So at this point, I have not received the final allocation of what that looks like. So you go through the entire process. Everybody who qualifies is given an opportunity to sign on. Once we know how many people sign on, we then get a spreadsheet that tells us over the next so many years, this is how much money you should expect. We don't have that yet. And we also will get more clarity around what is allowed or not allowed for these settlement activities. My hope would be that we would take the former settlement and this settlement, look at what's allowed in both, and try to come up with a program that would meet both of their standards so that we're not running separate reporting programs. As when we talked about this at committee, what we talked about was the fact that I think the town of Orono's share was under 40,000 in the first settlement. We were looking for the city of Bangor and Penobscot County to kind of get their ideas together so that we could join together and see if there was a regional program that we could either sign on to and participate in or augment with individual program here. So the answer to your question is I'm not going to make a decision on what the program is. Ultimately, council would make that decision. I would like to say that we are right all over this with the city of Bangor and Penobscot County, but right now they are desperately trying to work through the ARPA, their ARPA program. So I think this will probably end up a little bit on the back burner for a while, Rob. And as they are ready to engage this, I would think we would engage at that point in time. That does not mean that if council wants to jump into this now, that we can't do that. I would wait until we understand what the second settlement will bring, but there's nothing that says we have to wait for the city of Bangor. It's simply that city of Bangor has the public health division that serves this region. And I would think whatever we wanted to do would likely go through that arm.
That'll make sense. Thank you.
Any other questions? Comments? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded.
We are adjourned.